Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Silver Years. My name is DK, and I'm very happy to be here. And I humbly thank you for joining me. Today is a new segment of My Story Time. And for those who don't know, My Story Time is where I tell my story as a way to counter the ever changing official narrative of history, his story. Because no one, not even AI, can tell my story as a direct reflection of the times in which I lived better than me. And this is where I'm telling it. Now, the story that wants to be told today is coming in from around 1985 and begins in Denver, Colorado, where I was in my office at work, experiencing more pain than I'd ever known in my life. It was almost a year later before a doctor was finally able to identify the true source of that pain. And it all began with a pit stop, a trip to the restroom before a staff meeting at work. I noticed at the time that my urine was red from the blood that stained it, which clearly gave me cause for concern, even though I had no physical discomfort in that moment. And of course, nothing like that had ever happened to me before. I was young. I was in my late 20s. So I went into the scheduled meeting about 15 minutes later, and that's when the pain hit me like a wall. It was on my left side, deep inside, and it felt like my kidney, but I had no way of knowing for sure in that moment. I began almost hyperventilating to control the pain while in the meeting and couldn't get out of there fast enough. I ran into my office and began to cry. Well, I shut the door first. I began to cry as I alternated between pacing while breathing like I was in labor and bending over in agony. This lasted for quite a while. It felt like at the time an eternity, actually. It was a blur. Eventually, it subsided, and I was able to drive home at the end of my workday like it never happened. I did go see my internist the next day, who determined it was probably a kidney bladder infection. His solution was to prescribe an antibiotic, which appeared at the time to solve the problem, for a month or two anyway. I never had blood in my urine again, but the painful attacks did return without any advanced warning. Again, my doctor treated me for a kidney bladder issue. And this happened probably about 3 times before my doctor over the course of a number of months, maybe 6, 8 months. Okay, 3 times it happened at least, maybe more, before my doctor decided he needed to refer me to a urologist, a specialist in Denver, because I was living in Littleton at the time. The specialist didn't see anything of note during my initial consultation and sent me home for later review, I guess. I don't know. It was barely days later after seeing him the first time, and it was on a weekend when I ended up in the ER in Denver in the middle of the night. My next experience was like a scene out of a Saturday Night Live skit from the mid 1980s, back when Saturday Night Live was funny. And, I think it was even a Saturday night for real that it happened. The ER doctor was the spitting image of those characters portrayed in numerous Saturday Night Live skits where they'd show an on call Eastern Indian ER doctor who'd been working 48 hours straight without any sleep. The doctor in these skits always had big dark circles under their eyes, bloodshot eyes, and they'd come up with the most outrageous diagnoses that made the skits funny. Well, that was the doctor I got that night, and his diagnosis was not funny to me at the time. It's funny now, preposterous, in fact, but at the time, it was definitely not funny. He decided that what I had all these months was chlamydia. And for those who don't know, chlamydia is a venereal disease. And there I was in a hospital gown with husband number one standing next to me while our two young daughters were at home with my sister. And he's telling me that I have a venereal disease without even doing one test. Being as young and ignorant as I was at the time, it was admittedly traumatizing. Of course, it didn't go over well with my husband either. As if the horrendous pain in my body wasn't enough, right? This ER doctor gave me something for the pain, and I just said, I'll follow up with my urologist later. And I left, and I did follow up with the urologist. The minute I showed up at my follow up appointment with the specialist, he told me the minute he walked in the room, he knew what my problem was. It was a kidney stone. He did an x ray on the spot to confirm it. He said that because I was so young, it simply just wasn't the first thing he thought to look for. But the ER visit in the middle of the night made things clear to him. And yes, I did tell him about the ER doctor's preposterous diagnosis, which he completely dismissed with a wave of his hand. It's like, forget that. So the next step was how to treat the stone. I was told that I had three options. One was to wait and just pass the stone on my own. Sounds pretty painful, right? Two was to dissolve the stone using a lithotripsy procedure. The third option was surgical removal, either using a basket to retrieve and extract the stone through the ureter or to cut the stone out. It was clear, based on the large size and location of the stone, that option one was not an option. I was never going to pass it. It was all about, I personally was all about dissolving it with option number two. It was non-invasive and sound waves were used in the procedure to dissolve the stone so it could pass on its own as dust particles, basically. And Denver at the time housed the largest and the most advanced lithotripsy facility in the nation. So I took my x-rays in and had a consultation. I was told I was not a candidate because of the location of the stone. For it seems that day in my office when I had blood in my urine was the day that stone broke free from my kidney and began traveling down the pipeline of my ureter, and where it ultimately lodged itself low near my hip bone. According to the lithotripsy center, they needed to be able to laser the stones. They had to come in from two different directions. And because mine was in front of the hip bone, they couldn't effectively approach the stone from two directions. Okay, so now I'm left with option number three. Not my option of choice, but the stone needed to be removed. It was making me sick in more ways than one. And I'd had a low grade infection for close to a year by this point without even realizing it. That came to light after I was, after the stone was removed. And at the time I was feeling pretty crappy overall and getting crankier by the day because I felt so crappy. Surgery was scheduled. Thing was, there were things things at work that I needed to handle and organize before taking the time off to recover from a surgery. And the biggest thing was the foreclosure project we were managing in Telluride. To hell you ride, as they say. It was a condominium and retail complex at the base of the ski mountain. I decided I'd combine business and pleasure by taking my family along with me since I was going to be down for the count for a couple of months. It was spring, I think. The weather was beautiful. On Saturday morning, I don't know what it is about the Saturday, my oldest daughter wanted us all to go horseback riding, so we did. And there was no galloping or anything like that. It was just, a gentle cruise, a pleasure cruise. And I rode with my youngest daughter on my horse. She was probably about 3 years old, I think. It was great. We had a wonderful time. But I'm here to say today, I paid for that ride dearly by the evening. The pain began around dinner time, and I had little to no pain medication with me since I was scheduled for surgery the Monday after I got back from Telluride, just a couple days away. And let me just say here that childbirth was a very painful experience for me. I had delivered 2 children by this time, and my deliveries were far from easy or pain free. So I know what childbirth feels like. The pain for me this particular evening in Telluride was childbirth times 10. It was the most excruciating pain I had ever known then or since. I'm surprised I didn't pass out, to be honest. And nothing I did was would alleviate the agony. So I ran a warm bath and just laid in it and groaned and cried. My poor children had to be kept away from me. My husband was helpless, other than I made him try to track down a doctor who could give me something for the pain. There was no hospital or urgent care in Telluride at the time. It was a small mountain ski town located in a box canyon. The town hotline found the only doctor in town at a restaurant having dinner with his wife. His meal was interrupted so he could speak with my husband and arrange getting me a prescription from a pharmacy that had to be opened specially for this. It was after hours on a weekend, after all. By the time I got the prescription, the pain for me was beyond redemption. Nothing I took put a dent in the pain. And yet he didn't prescribe a whole bottle of pain pills. He only prescribed a few. And I took the entire bottle within a few hours without any relief. It gave me no relief. I sat in that bathtub as it turned cold, and I laid there for a good part of the night. Suffice to say, I was finally able to get in the car for the long drive back to Littleton the next day on Sunday. I showed up for surgery Monday morning as scheduled. And when my urologist came in to speak with me as I lay on the gurney before the procedure, I told him I needed to talk to him. I told him that I thought he needed to do a new x ray before he began the procedure because I think the stone had moved. The perplexed look on his face said it all. Moved? He said, well, he would do an x ray anyway because that was just protocol, but, moved. I told him that I'd gone horseback riding 2 days before in Telluride and I had a little issue. And all he could say was, you did what? Horseback riding? Why would you do that? Well, I explained what happened, and he told me not to worry. The surgery did remove the stone, but my poor ureter was an infected mess from all that it had been through. When I returned to his office a couple weeks later for a post-op check, he told me that he'd used me as a case study when he went to speak at a national urologist conference the week before. The woman with the kidney stone who went horseback riding. I guess I was an example of what not to do. He also did another x ray to make sure everything was cleared out. And then he said the unthinkable. Oh my, it looks like there might be another stone in there. It's hard to tell. We'll re examine this in a month or so when you come back, just to be sure. Well, that freaked me out. It freaked me out a lot, to say the least. So, what did I do? I went to a kinesiologist who I had seen many months before. So I went to him and I asked, what could I do to effectively dissolve a kidney stone? I did not want a replay of my previous experience. And his answer was simple. His answer was, drink a quart of distilled water with the juice of a fresh lemon in it every day. And so I did, every day without fail. A month later, I had another x ray. All was clear. I asked the radiologist if this distilled water with lemon method could work. Could it dissolve a kidney stone? And his response was, absolutely. I drank that lemon water for years, and I recommended it to anyone who's ever had an issue with kidney stones. Me personally, I have never had an issue again, and I never expect to. As for my wild ride in Telluride, I found out later that I was the talk of the town and written up about in the local paper. The horseback riding, out of towner with a kidney stone. Good times. All right, so that's that. In conclusion, and for whatever it's worth, this is my little protest against his story. This is me telling my story my way. For the record, it's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I would love to hear your stories as well, so please feel free to share your stories in the comments. Until next time, be well, choose love, and thank you. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.